My name is Petra. I've been volunteering with Sussex Homeless Support. Jim Deans is the founder of Sussex Homeless Support and has been running and building the organisation. Stewart is an architect and has been working with us as well on this project. So we're going to take turns and hopefully it'll be something a little bit different, because one essential difference is, this is really urgent. We can't afford to spend 5 years kind of building capacity and putting in policies and procedures while there's people dying in the streets. So it kind of feels like, we live in an affluent city, and yet there are literally people dying in the streets. Over 800 homeless people have died in the UK in the last 18 months. How many in Brighton?
Over 50 in the last 2 years have died on the streets, and we don't even calculate how many have died in supported accommodation of various different illnesses.
So, you all see people sleeping in the doorways, and it's a horrible, horrible situation, and it's got worse and worse and worse. So Sussex Homeless Support has been going for how many years?
This is our sixth year, although we only incorporated as a charity just over a year ago.
And I'm just going to whip through this, offer a range of different support services. So one is a Sunday street kitchen at the Clock Tower, which now feeds about 230 people every week. And this is all food from donations from businesses across Sussex, and cooked in a kitchen. Lots and lots of volunteers turn up. We get donations of clothes, donations of toiletries, and this is really essential survival stuff for people. In the winter, people come and they need socks, they need hats, they need gloves, all that kind of stuff. We now also have street vets and nurses looking after the homeless people and their pets. Legal advice provided by housing lawyers, and then lots of signposting to other services. But one of the really big things is about actually some human contact, handing out cups of tea. It sounds ridiculous, but actually the act of being given a cup of tea is a big, big thing. And the homeless people, a lot of it is mostly men, but some women, they come actually to connect on a person-to-person level. So we're dealing with the kind of very much physiological needs, some of the contact needs, really basic stuff. Second thing, this was something that was started last year. Jim got a disused double-decker bus, and it was converted into a shelter. It sits on the seafront, and it provides a place to sleep in the warmth during the winter months. So it's open 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. every night. There's now a second bus which has been converted for women, and so in total that offers about 24 people homes over the cold winter months. Again, really basic stuff. The main problem we're addressing, I'm going to hand this over to Jim because he knows much more about it than I do.
So what we do is a service which is almost like life-saving service right now. So we've got the people, we're providing them with food, we're giving them clothing, but they just keep coming more and more and more. And what we're tending to see is we're seeing the same people who are somehow managing to get into some form of accommodation, but then within 2 or 3 weeks they're back on the street again. And it's just like this constant revolving door of people that you think are getting better, and the next thing you know they're back in the street. And the main reason for that is some of these things that the homeless have to deal with. So if you've got an addiction, which is part of the reason for being in the street, they tell you that, okay, no problem, we're going to give you rehab, but you have to do 6 months without taking drugs before you get rehab. So which obviously if you can do 6 months without taking alcohol or drugs, then you don't really need rehab, because you don't. But this is kind of thing, and they test people regularly. But what we've identified is that it's almost like a housing first concept. There isn't any point whatsoever in trying to provide anything other than what we already provide, which is life-saving service, unless we can accommodate them. And so we looked at all the accommodation, and we went meetings with everybody, and then we met up with the CLT, and they took what was appearing to be a crazy idea of building our own supported accommodation. And so they would be intensive. Stuart will tell you a bit about how they're built, but I can tell you how we'll support them. We'll support them by giving them everything you need when you walk in there. The type of things that you take for granted, like a television and a radio. You'll have heating in your house, you'll have everything there. So when you walk in the door, you've got clean sheets, clean bedding, and that's the part we'll provide. And that's not provided in the city right now. People get accommodation, they go there, and there's a bare bed, nothing on the walls, no TV and anything else. So what we'll provide is the build part of it. We've identified where the issue is and what's missing, because you can build the steps, but what's missing is this part in the middle. Stewart.
So his inspirational idea was to somehow create accommodation supported accommodation for these previously homeless people that got into emergency accommodation before they can actually step up and get private rented accommodation, give a deposit, pay a month's rent, etc. That's a huge gap. So what goes in its place? There are lots of empty sites, or meanwhile building sites, potential development sites scattered all over the town that you know of, and they're not being used. So this concept of meanwhile use. If we build a little portable, temporary accommodation pod and prefabricated, and then arrive and stack 3 or 4 or 5 on a disused site for a very short period of time, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 years. We've created a small temporary community, but there are places where that people can call home. But it's a very basic. It's small and it's very basic for cost reasons, to keep it temporary, to keep it mobile. So this is sort of like a large one of these camper homes, residential camp. It's got a shower, it's got a kitchen area, it's got a bed. This is for a single person, and it's got some storage. The idea is to make this prefabricated and fabricated off-site, and to make it really, really, really cheap as it can be done. So getting technical, these are separate panels, SIP panels probably, with a sheet of plywood or OSB on either face of insulation, so it can actually hold its own structure. It doesn't need a separate structure to go around it. And they get fitted to a frame and a roof put on, and they're done. We haven't properly costed it, but I'm aiming for less than £10,000 per unit, and that will be just delivered to the site.
Maybe 2, 4, 6 of these pods. We really don't think the idea of putting 24 or 30 of these pods in one area is such a great idea, because the public don't want it in their back door, but the public actually do quite like the idea of having a small number that they can manage and deal with, and also the fact that these are totally temporary and totally portable.
The services obviously to an empty site would be a challenge, so getting mains electricity into the site, getting water into the site would be a sort of minimum, but obviously people live out of camper vans and they're not connected at all, so we could even be flexible on that. To make it more likely to be acceptable, they can wear different outfits. This is the same structure, it's all exactly the same structure, all the same panels, they've just got a different cladding on the outside, so you can dress it up for the site to appease the planners, etc. And they can be dismantled at the end of it, or picked up and taken somewhere else. So it's the temporary nature of it and the cheap nature, but to provide a safe and secure and comfortable living space.
We've got a warehouse right now, Sackville Road, and so the idea with these we would literally build them on a trailer, so they would be assembled and wheeled up, so you can work daytime, nighttime. Most of the guys that work with us are homeless, And so there's a whole load of different level under the project where our plumber is an alcoholic, our electrician was an alcoholic and recovering, both are homeless, but giving them this project means that they can work on it. These are the same guys that built the bus and worked on the bus. In regards to power and water, we have no access to power, we have no access to water on the buses right now. And last night there was 12 people living on a bus, and you better believe in the wind and the rain last night, their lives were saved, because if they were left out in that wind and rain last night, they would have been very sick. So it is possible for us to move water to it. It's not ideal, but what we have to get across is the fact that we're a solution, and so therefore we're not going to take one issue and say, well, that's it, over. We will work our way around whatever we get. Most of the land is council owned, so therefore we'll be asking the public, can we use this for 5 years? And at the end of 5 years, sure, unscrew his plateau that it sits on, and in a month's time you'll never know we've been there. Because these things literally screw to the ground.
We looked at Homes England as a possible source of funding, and we've started writing a business case. I think one of the things is this is really, really pressing, and we need to get this underway now. And I think the timescales for, actually getting all the structures and processes in place in terms of, just the referral systems, it takes time. And it's almost like you have to have that before you can apply to Homes England. So we feel that we need to just get going and do it. So I think we'll look at the Homes England or other funding streams in addition.
I actually don't see any problem with funding. How this will work from an HA, it will be housing benefit. So housing benefit for these would pay £630 a month. Each of these housing benefit would pay for, which is not a huge amount of money. And that's paid. So really, if you actually look logically, if Stewart can build these things at the prices, we can get them on decent services without a lot of money. You're talking about a 3-year investment, and you've got all your money back. So really, it's investable. Well, I'm not expecting big, massive grants from anybody. What I'm expecting to do is be able to fund it ourselves from the public, even to possibly fund it. But it's a business venture, so therefore funding it.
You reminded me. The key point is if the housing benefit. If Sussex Homeless Support maintain control of these units, they're basically leasing them out to the occupants, and the housing benefit is paid directly to Sussex Homeless Trust, and £100 of that payment is set aside in a savings account. So when they come to leave their pod and move out into the bigger world, up into private rented, there's a deposit,
All the money there.
which is then
There's also a track record. They've spent 6 months or a year with us.
Yeah.
They've paid their rent on time. They've not smashed their place up. We're quite happy to become their guarantors on a move on project. And that's really important.
So the other thing I was just going to say is we've just started having, Jim's been having meetings for months and months and months, but he and I went to see Brighton Housing Trust and the Arch Project and Just Life, and so we're liaising and networking with all other local support organisations, so it becomes a community project, a city-wide project. There's lots of support from councillors and officers at the council. So it's something that basically we're just getting all our ducks in a row, and then it will be launched as a public, at a public event, and we'll welcome any of you to be along there and help support us.
Conversion of a shipping container is probably a little bit more expensive than what we're anticipating doing. The reason that I focused on simple timber construction is basically to have these guys, previous homeless, building it. Yeah. If we can set up a sort of factory production line, and I'm trying to keep the technical stuff as simple as possible, so you can build it with a screwdriver and a hammer and a drill, and that's it. no special tools, etc.
Shipping
That's the game.
containers are actually, everybody that's in this world will tell you that's the worst thing to build.
Yeah.
You're taking a refrigerator and then trying to heat it up,
Yeah.
because they're metal on the outside and they
Yeah.
do nothing but overheat in summer and underheat. And
I was going to say, when we met with Brighton Housing Trust, they said the shipping containers that are at the bottom of England Street, they cost something like 50,000 each. And actually they found it was quite difficult to get building regs approval, and they have various issues, especially around heating. So the heating is very, very expensive, and obviously, you know, when somebody's moving from being homeless to being in emergency accommodation where, you know, heating's provided, then that whole sort of budgeting system and, you know, actually getting by on a small amount of money. So that's another reason of building, you know, almost passive house standards for these pods.
to be honest, we'd love the council to build houses, and we've waited for them since, you know, forever, and they're not gonna. It's not gonna happen. The council don't make any difference what we do. The council will not build any property. They've failed everywhere in the city. They presented a city plan to the public that says they need 32,000 homes by 2030, and here's our plan. We're going to build less than half, and of the less than half, they've already lost two massive sites. So it's not a plan, it's a surrender. So really, I don't think anything the council does is going to affect us at all.
But also there's a waiting list of around 200 for supported accommodation, and the waiting time is something like 6 months or more, and people are being sent out of Brighton to Newhaven where there's very little actual support available at all. So in the long run, if the council by some miracle build, then that's fine. We'll have provided the pods in the meantime.
Brighton and Hove Community Land Trust supports groups of people who want to create their own community-led housing projects. Join us at bhclt.org.uk.